let's welcome back to the programme the author of the recent books COVID-19, the greatest hoax in history, and proof that face masks do more harm than good. The former GP, the former national newspaper columnist, and a man who sold millions of books around the world. We love him. It's the one and only Dr. Vernon Coleman. Vernon, welcome back and thanks for being here again today.
Thank you, Richie. Thanks for inviting me.
Every week it seems it's I don't want to be glib now at all, but it's nuttier and nuttier every week, isn't it? You've got a load of evidence. You've got a trench or I don't know, a briefcase full of evidence that injuries, vaccine injuries, are happening. I sent you a Facebook post from a woman today. We'll talk about that in a moment. But you've got people from nationally famous or nationally renowned universities saying that joggers should be wearing face masks when they're out and about and jogging. It's getting crazier by the week.
My first thought when I heard about that was to report her to the General Medical Council, because that was foul, a foul thing to say. Even the government suggests that you shouldn't, if you're exercising, obviously for your health, you should not wear a mask. I know of at least 2 and probably more deaths from people wearing masks while exercising, so that was just reckless. The whole thing, the whole plague story, does not stand up. The total number of COVID-positive cases in the world, and that's with a massive false fake testing program, which I'll come back to in a moment, is at the last time I looked, 89.7 million. Compare that. In an average sort of year, flu cases worldwide reach 1 billion. In other words, 10 times as many cases. And the COVID figures are being measured not in a flu season, but in a rolling basis. So they started in November 2019, and they're still adding up. Flu is always measured in seasons. So for the Northern Hemisphere, October to the end of April. But for COVID, my word, you look at the statistics the government and the World Health Organization have got, and I could probably tell you how many left-handed bricklayers died on a Wednesday, allegedly with COVID. But look at the statistics. The number of flu deaths in a 6-month season, according to the World Health Organization, I mean, I've said this a million times, but it can be 650,000 deaths a year. The total number of COVID deaths in their rolling the figures up is now allegedly 1.9 million. But that's people who've died with COVID. You might as well say people who died with athlete's foot. They're measuring it from 28 days back. If they tested positive within 28 days, they died of COVID. But some of the figures are for 60 days. But you look at that and you measure it with other illnesses worldwide. Diarrheal communicable diseases, 1.5 million die every year. TB deaths, 1.4 million die every year. Children, 3.1 million children die of hunger every year.
Yeah.
Global deaths from pneumonia, 3 million a year. And a third of those are under 5. You don't very often hear people saying we must shut down the country for pneumonia. And where's Black Lives Matter with all these diseases which are exclusive pretty well exclusive to black children? The hunger deaths, 3.1 million. The diarrheal diseases, 1.5 million. You add all these up, and you look at what is allegedly the COVID deaths. And then I went back to flu, because flu seems to have disappeared. I looked at the World Health Organization site, and this is what they say. Flu is slow and low last year. There were no flu cases at all. None at all. None. In the Caribbean, Central America or South America. The flu was sporadic in India, and sporadic detection of influenza in some countries in the Northern Hemisphere. That was published on the 4th of January 21 by the World Health Organization. But they did find 379 tested positive cases for flu last year. 379. That's not 379 million, that's 379. And remember, Flu usually hits 1 billion a year. What are they doing with the figures? Everything they tell you, you can't trust anything. They're saying that the hospitals are busier than ever. That's not true. You can look at the statistics, the figures. They say that the staff, medical health staff, that 46,000 have got COVID. That's not true. 46,000 have tested positive. And that's...
Putting them out of work. This is a huge point, isn't it? Because I saw a graph today that appeared to be genuine that showed that some years ago there were 240,000 hospital beds in this country, but now something like less than 160,000. So the numbers of beds have been coming down, and as you've quite rightly pointed out there, they're telling staff to stay off work. They're understaffed anyway. Long before the coronavirus thing, they needed more nurses and they needed more doctors. Now they're telling them to stay off even though they're not unwell. So of course they're bound to be under pressure.
It's absolutely
mad.
It's obscene. Everywhere you look, they're cancelling cancer treatment. Fewer than half of the people who needed surgery for cancer have had it. Kids' dental treatment. Last year, 50% less kids got any dental treatment last year. And what are they doing this for? A disease that they have to make up the figures for. A disease where they have to exaggerate wildly, where they produce all this absolute bollocks, to use a medical term, about what's happening. The PCR test, as you know, the figures for the PCR test are so bad that the Portuguese higher court said you can't count this, it's rubbish. And the guy who invented the test, it wasn't invented for what it's being used for, because it's too easy to fiddle it. What they do is they multiply or increase the vision of the number of bits of virus that they see when they take a swab. Now, the World Health Organization, which is supposed to be the thing that we listen to all the time, the World Health Organization says you should only do this about 25 times. But the UK government, like other governments, is doing it 35, 40 times. So instead of just picking up people who've got COVID, they're picking up people who had a cold in 1967. It's bizarre and beyond belief how they're fraudulently cheating. And they can do this as often as they like, of course, because they wind it up or wind it down. If they want to be less cases, then they bring down the PCR test to just 25 cycles. If they want to push it up, then they increase it back to 35, 40 cycles. It's not science. They talk about being led by the science. There's been no science in this since March, when the COVID-19, let us remember, was downgraded to flu status. That was nearly a year ago. They've known that. What the devil are they doing? Well, I know what they're doing, and I'll tell.
Can I ask you a question before that? This is really, really important now. Two things. You were right to say that less than half the cancer operations were done. I know this to be true because the BBC presenter on Radio 4 this morning reluctantly acknowledged this. It was certainly true even last week for London. Less than half of those who needed surgery, who needed chemo or whatever, less than half actually got it. That's really important. Now the PCR thing, this is really interesting, right? When they announced the lateral flow test, the rapid lateral flow test, they said this would be a game changer. And I remember a paper came out of Oxford University saying that this was a fantastic test. It was incredibly accurate and people could trust it. Well, there seems to be a problem now because it isn't finding much coronavirus in people. And now you're getting academics, including a woman called Angela Raffel, who's a consultant in public health. They're coming out of the woodwork today to try and discredit the lateral flow test because it's basically saying that the person doesn't have coronavirus. So they're saying it's throwing up false negatives. I can't believe this.
Yeah, they can't fiddle it. You see, the PCR test, they can fiddle till the cows come home. Dead easy. And then when you've fiddled it, you've got more cases. And when you've got more cases, you can have more lockdowns. And then you can have more mask-wearing rules. And you can have more social distancing rules. And they're using the PCR test as a tool to control people. And that's what this is all about. And then they can push the vaccines. And the vaccines, the facts about the vaccines, I don't know whether you saw this, I'm sure you did, but let me just quote, because I wrote it down so that I could read it word for word. This is a chief scientist from the World Health Organization just before Christmas. Open quotes. I'll read it very slowly to make sure I get every word right. Don't believe we have the evidence on any of the vaccines to be confident that it's going to prevent people from actually getting the infection and therefore being able to pass it on.
Yeah.
Those quotes. What the? I mean, they're saying it doesn't work, and you get, and it can kill you. I listed some people on my website, some actual specific people with the links, specific people who've already died, and the side effects are horrendous. To be honest, you're better off if to have COVID-19 than to have the vaccine. It's absolutely obscene.
Here's one for you. Dr. Vernon Coleman is our guest, 22 minutes past 6. In a few minutes' time, Vernon is going to outline why he believes all of this is happening. I know we got into that some months ago, but I want to get into it again today. On injuries and fatalities, here's an email from a friend of mine who's absolutely unimpeachable. And my friend tells me, Richie, my husband was called into work early on Saturday morning to cover his boss because his boss's father had just died suddenly. His boss had left work early on Friday to take his dad to get the vaccine. His father died the following morning. Is that just a coincidence, or is it the start of something? My friend sent to me, and my friend is living in Florida and is no bullshitter, unimpeachable. If my friend says that happened, it happened. And you've come across a number of similar cases.
Yeah, there are people dying in different parts of the world from this vaccine. And I'll tell you something else, Richie. If you die within 28 days of having a positive PCR test, which is known to be rubbish, but if you die within 28 days or 60 days, depends what they think for the moment, you died with COVID-19. Then that's put down in the figures. So effectively, as far as they're concerned, you died of it. If, however, you die within 2 hours of having a vaccine, oh, no, that's nothing to do with the vaccination. That's just hard luck. Even though you were perfectly fit until you had the vaccine, it's got nothing to do with anything. It's just a coincidence. It's just unfortunate. These things happen. People die. It's double standards. It's madness. There was a report the other day. They said there was no evidence to show that it was safe to give COVID-19 vaccines to women who were breastfeeding or to breastfed infants. And the government said, oh, well, never mind, we'll approve it because it'll be probably safe. Yeah, probably safe. Probably safe to give the vaccines. I don't know which one, probably all of them. I hope bloody Matt Hancock has one in each arm and one in his bum as well. I think he's mutated. COVID-19, they are prepared to give it to breastfeeding women. We're a laughing stock in the world because we're prepared to mix different vaccines and everybody else thinks that's a really stupid idea. You can't make this stuff up. You can't imagine what they're going to do next. The vaccines, that organisation, MHRA, that you and I love so much, before Christmas, they were advertising, MHRA urgently seeks an artificial intelligence software tool to process and I'm reading this from their application thing, process the expected high volume of COVID-19 vaccine adverse drug reactions. There you go. They knew there were going to be a lot of adverse drug reactions for a vaccine being given for a disease which is no more of a killer than flu. 99% plus recovery data. I don't know. The fact is, and this is really worrying, people who've had the vaccine can afterwards get something called a paradoxical immune enhancement. What it means is that when you get the vaccine in your body, you develop quite high antibody levels. Now, you might think this was good, but it isn't, because when you're exposed again to the coronavirus in the future, you can develop an immune overreaction. And that's what happens. That's what can happen with these sort of vaccines. And then in a few months' time, heaven knows what, maybe next autumn, people who've had the vaccine, I believe and fear, are going to be dropping like flies, part of the depopulation program, perhaps.
And Dolores Cahill told me this last week on this program, and she explained it as you did there. We went into it in some detail, and to her eternal credit, she explained it where even a dunce like me could understand it. It's shocking stuff, isn't it? It'll prime your immune system to attack maybe your own internal organs when seasonal coronavirus comes around next year or the year after, or even sooner. And the virus might be in your kidneys, or it might be anywhere. And you could have serious organ failure. It's a possibility. She didn't come on here and say, oh, it's going to happen. She's responsible like you. She says it could happen.
Yeah, and they don't know any more than you or I know whether it could happen.
Yeah.
Nobody knows, but they're taking this huge, huge risk, because if it happens, and I believe it will, if it happens, then what they'll do is they'll say, look, there you are, you see, it was a more dangerous disease, or it's mutated. And incidentally, going back to the mutated, they say they can switch the mRNA around for different mutations.
Yeah.
But how the hell are they going to know which person's got which virus and which one they want to protect against? But that's beside the point. The fact is that by the time we get to the point where people are dying because of the paradoxical immune reaction, then we've got, they will be so excited because they can say, there you are, you see, there's more people dying now, we need to have more vaccines, and it's all the fault of that Vernon Coleman and that Richie and those people. It's all their fault. We've got to have more vaccinations. Let's have more people jabbed with more and more powerful vaccines, because the numbers have gone up, and we need to have more lockdowns. And the lockdowns are not going away. People have the vaccine and think they're going to be all right. There's not going to be any more problems. I just read out the World Health Organization. The vaccine does not stop you getting it. The one thing it supposedly does is it reduces the symptoms, maybe the mild symptoms, I don't know. But they're going to carry on with social distancing. They're going to carry on with masks. And, of course, today they were talking about not letting people into supermarkets if they're not wearing a mask. So that's sick people, people with heart disease, people with respiratory disease can't buy bread. What a bloody country!
They're looking at compelling the supermarkets to deal with it. You're absolutely right in saying that. And Jonathan Van Tam, the Deputy Chief Medical Officer, went on the record before Christmas to say that there will be a cultural shift in terms of how we behave with one another, and masks will become fairly common in periods of winter and all. So again, you're absolutely right to say this. So, is it an Occam's razor thing? So, if I accept, now I'm not a learned gentleman such as yourself, and I'm not kissing your arse. You are you're a medical expert, but I'm not. So let me say this. I am a decent researcher though, and I know that when you say that they know that COVID is not really serious, you're telling the truth. They know that COVID is not really serious. They know that lockdowns don't work. They know that masks are useless. They know this. They know that this vaccine will be utterly useless as well, and it may very well do very serious damage to people. Again, for anybody not familiar with Occam's razor, look it up. I can only conclude, Vernon, that somebody does want to do away with a lot of people. And now we're into the why they want to do this.
Yeah, absolutely. The why. Why are they destroying the economy? Why are they locking us all up? I just thought of something. Can I do, before I explain the why, can I just say, you mentioned the mask book and the COVID book, both of which are available free on my website as PDFs, and they're also on the lightpaper.co.uk. There's now a Spanish version and a Dutch version. Thanks very much to a Spanish publisher who's agreed to do them free. In other words, make them free.
Brilliant.
If you want it in Spanish. And there's going to be a Dutch version. And the Dutch version, bless his heart, was produced by a professional cellist with one of the big philharmonic orchestras. And he translated it into Dutch. Anyway, that was just an aside. Because
wonderful.
What I wanted to say, I wanted to presume on your generosity and say, if anybody wants to do a French or a German, please let us know, because or whatever other languages, because this is the masks book, which is vital. It's full of, you've seen it, Richie, it's full of information about why masks are bad for you.
Facts.
Anyway.
It's full of facts. It's full of facts. So why then? VernonColeman.com. You are listening to Dr. Vernon Coleman on the Richie Allen radio show. National newspaper columnist, successful author, successful GP, left medicine, practicing medicine of his own volition. Why? Why in the name of God are they doing this when they know the damage it's doing?
I need to tell you a story because it's quite long-winded where it started from, but I can summarize it. There are people around, of course, who will say that the whole caboodle, what we know as Agenda 21, actually started centuries ago. You could probably trace it back to Adam and Eve muttering about something, but really, I've traced it back, I believe, to about 1909, 111 years ago. The Andrew Carnegie Foundation, who pointed out, and I think they were the first modern people to point out, that there is a need for something to control people. And what they thought was war was the best thing to control people. Jump to 1932, Columbia University had the idea for using a new form of currency using energy. And they called what they devised as the new currency technocracy. And this was making the world run by scientists, abolishing private property because that's not very effective or efficient, education simply preparing students or the work for which they've been prepared. And Aldous Huxley was so amazed by this technocracy at Columbia University that he wrote Brave New World. Everything I'm telling you can check out on the web. I'm not giving references because we'll be here till next Wednesday. And then in 1961, there was the meeting at the Iron Mountain, the infamous Iron Mountain meeting, where a group of Kennedy insiders, all I think of whom, or at least most of whom were Bilderbergers, which had just been put together, they resurrected the old idea, the Andrew Carnegie Foundation idea, about the necessity of war and the need, believe it or not, for slavery, the need to actually control people. And they had the idea, they were the first people to have the idea of creating a massive amount of pollution, then making people feel guilty and making them clear up all the pollution they'd created. Then we jumped to 1968. The next important thing was when the Club of Rome was created. They're important because they come in a bit later on. A couple of years after that, the World Economic Forum, it wasn't called that until 87, but they're the complete morons who have these meetings at Davos, which I stupidly for years would just thought were a wonderful place for Bonio to go and flex his checkbook or whatever. Yeah. but it wasn't. The World Economic Forum was something far worse and far more significant. But then the next big thing was in 1976, the United Nations, a bunch of completely unelected bureaucrats, decided that they wanted to control the world's land and to control the population because they decided there were too many people living on planet Earth. And they decided that we all had to be treated as criminals and we all had to put the community first above individuals. And then in 1980, they invented sustainable development, of which everyone has heard, because sustainable development, of course, is what Prince Charles and all the other people who believe in Agenda 21 use as their religion. And they set up a commission to look into creating a new world order. Now we go back to the Club of Rome, 1991. They decided they needed to find a way to motivate people, to worry people, to put fear into people so that they could control them as part of the Agenda 21, which hadn't then developed, but it was what the United Nations wanted. And they came up with global warming, which was an old idea, which has been reheated, if you'll pardon the terrible pun, because in the 19th century, global warming had many times been introduced as a problem, and it had been poo-pooed and proved to be a load of rubbish. So that's 1991. Club of Rome says, hey, look, if you want to terrify everybody on the planet so much that you can control them, tell them that the planet's getting hotter and it's their fault and we've got to do something about it. So thankfully for them, in 1992 there was a United Nations conference in Brazil, and that's when Agenda 21 was born. And if you haven't heard of Agenda 21, boy, have you been missing something, because Agenda 21 is the reason for COVID-19 being dramatically over-exaggerated. It's a reason for all the fear. It's a reason for the masks and the compliance that goes with it. It's a reason for social distancing. It's the reason for the vaccines. It's the reason for everything. It's exactly the same as the technocracy idea that Aldous Huxley turned into Brave New World. 178 world leaders immediately signed up to the Agenda 21 thing, the communitarianism, the idea that the community is everything. And guess who was there at the beginning, cheering away on the sidelines? Blair and Clinton and Gore, who then produced his discredited DVD, which it was just full of false rubbish. And they came up then with carbon trading, a huge way to make money. Doesn't make any difference to anything, because the people who are creating the problems simply buy carbon credits from other people, and the carbon credit traders, Al Gore and co., make a ton of money. And there's an ex-Liberal MP, by the way, who now imports all the biomass, or a lot of the biomass that we burn, because everybody thinks it's good, like solar energy and wind energy. They talk about all the energy we're getting from non-fossil fuels, but most of it's actually coming from wood. They're burning trees, call it biomass. They're burning trees, which the planet desperately needs. Burning that and saying that's making the planet greener. And that's it was about 92, I think, that Prince Idiot Charles got involved. And this is all about power and money. It was all about getting control of the entire world. And the things that they decided even then, and which they'd been working towards, and which the European Union worked towards, because by then the European Union had become involved in this early Agenda 21 plan, was getting local governments, forcing local governments to force local citizens to do recycling in order to train and control them. The recycling was always a load of rubbish. Most of our recycling rubbish, sorry, I didn't mean that, but most of it is taken to China, or China recently said, we don't want any more of your rubbish, we've got enough of our own, and we sent it back. But half of it ended up floating around in Eastern European countries, where it was taken to be burned or taken to be put into dumps, and half of it just ended up floating around the streets. So all those people wasting water, washing out yogurt cartons, that's what happened to your rubbish. But it was all part of a training program, a compliance program, the same as the masks are part of a compliance program. And the Agenda 21, they also wanted to get rid of, to take people out of rural areas. Because if you get people out of rural areas and you put them all in smart cities, big tower blocks, you can control them easier. Their argument was people in the country, they waste a lot of energy travelling about. So they've been trying very effectively to get rid of people from the countryside by giving them terrible broadband, by not repairing water supplies, by refusing to allow people to take water from boreholes, by not mending roads and so on. And they also decided to dumb down education and to make it so children were simply educated for jobs. They weren't educated to think, because they don't want people to be educated to think, because then they might see through what's happening. And then after this, these are early days after 9/11, when the Americans had all those incredibly oppressive laws, and we got Tony Blair telling us we had to have ID cards, and there were new laws popping up all over the place because of terrorism, because of disease, because we were having too much to do with animals, either as pets, or we were having them and eating them, or we were wandering around the world. We must stop travel. We must stop people travelling about. This is all a control thing. Knock down old houses, because although they might be very solid and efficient, we don't want them. We want people living in apartment blocks. And then they came up with regionalisation, which is a part of globalisation, which of course is what the EU wanted when they broke up the United Kingdom. They gave Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland little quasi-parliaments, because then the Scots and the Welsh would think they were on the route to independence, and actually they're going on the exact opposite route to independence. They tried to divide up England into 9 regions, offered the people of North East England a chance to vote on it, and the people in North East England said, no, thank you very much, we don't want any of that. Remember John Prescott?
I do indeed. Yeah.
And in the southeast of England, this was all done to London Parliament's part of this, but one of the UK England regions, and it was so blatant that I remember writing about this in a book called England Our England, how to print. No, it isn't how to print, and that was in 2001, I think, and everybody was laughing at me because I said, what they're going to do is they're going to break up England into 9 regions. And one of the regions of the southeast England region, was tucked in with a bit of northern France because of this attempt to destroy England. They were the Agenda 21 people and the EU realised that they had to destroy England as a force, and they could get rid of the Scottish nationalists by promising them Scottish independence. One of the basic principles of Agenda 21 is that there is no sovereignty, no nationalities, so they want to get rid of all that. So the Scots, who think they're voting for independence, are actually voting to be part, by wanting to go back into the EU, is they're actually voting for their own demise as a country. The other thing that the Agenda 21 wanted was no privacy, and to shame everybody, because it was decided that this was the best way to control people. No privacy at all. So that's what's been happening with all the things that you can think of. You think of all the things that have happened, and they want to get rid of transport. They want to get rid of cars. Look what's happening in cities. They have all these cycle lanes in little roads that aren't wide enough for cycle lanes, so the cars can't get through. And where they don't do that, they put all this crazy road furniture in order to control the traffic, to make driving even
more difficult.
Increase the taxes, have all these diesel scandals. The whole thing is planned to stop people using cars. If you want to drive your car into London, it's a nightmare because you've got to sign up for all sorts of really bizarre things. And then there's the idea of changing the whole climate. Bill Gates, as you know, Bill Gates has invested in all of these things. He's invested in laboratory food, where they're growing this fake meat in laboratories, because they're going to get rid of farms. And the farmers who think that their big job now is to try to persuade the British government to give them a common agricultural policy deal, the farmers really should be trying to work out how much money they're going to get when they're compulsorily purchased, because there ain't going to be any farming, because it's all going to be made artificially in labs. And then you've got Bill Gates, who's spraying. People are not going to believe this, but it's true. You can check it out. Bill Gates has invested in a company which is got planes up in the sky, spraying powder around. And I feel like a lunatic saying it, but honestly, you can check it all out. It's all there on the internet. Just put in the words and you get.
Yeah, I can endorse that. I've known about geoengineering schemes going back years. I've heard from pilots and even environmentalists. I used to speak to an environmentalist in Hawaii whose surname escapes me. His name is Bruce. Lovely guy from Earthwatch. Really credible guy. And he was able, I know you're talking about something slightly different now, but he was able to determine massive levels of aluminium and barium and strontium in the soil. Hawaii gets sprayed to death there. All of this is real, and you shouldn't certainly feel bonkers when you say it, because it's a stone cold fact. If somebody is denying now that spraying is going on in our atmosphere, well, you're either obtuse or you're stupid, in my opinion. Gloves are off now.
Yeah. So there you go. And the chemtrails. Chemtrails are real.
Chemtrails,
They are deliberately depopulating the world, because everybody from Prince Philip down thinks there's too many people, including Boris Johnson.
Yeah.
And so they off the elderly and the sick. It's not a coincidence. It's happening. Everything, the microchips, the ID cards, the brainwashing, getting rid of the police to bring in the military, education just so that they're training children who will not belong to their parents by the time we finish this. They will belong to the state, because there's evidence already. They've already tried to push through laws in Scotland, the Scottish Parliament, where the Scottish Parliament would actually effectively have guardianship over children.
That's right. All of this is the named. Hang on a second. This is really important now. This is the named person scheme, isn't it?
Yeah.
Where somebody would be appointed, as a kind of an overseer, or I think you used the perfect word, guardian, for every child in the country. That person might be an authority figure. It might be a doctor. It might be a policeman or woman. This is scary shit. And you know what you just said there about you wouldn't be you wouldn't be you wouldn't be the parent of your child. That's already here, because we know that social services in this country are stealing tens of thousands of children a year from mothers who've done nothing wrong. Often they use what do they use? Potential of future harm, future emotional harm, and all of this bollocks. Yeah.
You put a sign for Brexit up in your window.
Yeah.
Come in and take you. If they think you've been, if they have teachers ask children, what sort of programs do your parents watch? And or do you listen to on the wireless? If they say, "Oh, my parents like listen to the Richie Allen," bang, go and collect the kids because the parents aren't good parents. If you think about this, everything that I've said, you can see where it's happening bit by bit. Healthcare being destroyed, the National Health Service being turned into a National Death Service. It was not a coincidence. This is all part of the plan to take us to the next bit. We are going. People who look at China and think, "Oh, I wouldn't fancy living there." China now is what we are heading for very quickly. This is the biggest war any of us have ever fought, and if we don't win this war, we are sunk, because they will come after us. They will vaccinate us. They will masks and social distancing. You can have as many vaccinations as you like. They are not going to take away the masks and the social distancing.
No, they're not.
Part of it. And then, incidentally, you talk about owning kids. They own you, because the default position now is if they want to take your liver or heart when you've died, or when they think you've died, they're entitled to do that. One of the aims of all this, of course, is to take us to the social credit score. When I first heard about the social credit score in China, which I think was about 10 years ago, I thought, what a wonderfully stupid thing. Only the Chinese could do that. But you look at what they're doing. What they do is, if you misbehave, you start off with so many points. I don't know, say 1,000. It isn't, I can't remember what it is. But you start off with so many points, 1,000 points. And everything you do, which is good, gives you more points, and everything that you do is bad, you lose points. So if you're a bad citizen, then you lose some points. Well, what does being a bad citizen? Well, being a bad citizen is having a motor car, or having a powerful motor car, having a big motor car. Having an electric car is good at the moment, but it won't be good for long, because they don't want any cars at all, and there isn't going to be enough electricity.
Having too many people in your house, having too much red meat, driving to the countryside too often. Absolutely.
Yeah. Spending you're buying too much alcohol in your shopping, buying too many cigarettes in your shopping, traveling too much, flying too much, having too much, borrowing too much money. And what happens then is that you get negative points. And these passports, they don't need vaccines for these passports. They're going to give us all passports like the Chinese. And if you want to travel, they'll have a look at your passport and they'll say, "Oh no, you were late with your tax form, or you've been done for speeding. You can't have good broadband and you can't travel. You better do some charity work and give some blood and have a few more vaccines."
Yeah, so the state becomes some austere stepfather who really doesn't like you very much. That's what happens then, isn't it? Yeah.
That's what the social credit score is all about. It's happened in China, and if you think about it, it's happening here. Smart meters. If you have a smart meter in your house and you think, "Oh, I've got my electric car, I'm a smart meter, so I'm okay with the electricity." If they want to shut you off with a smart meter, they can turn your smart meter off from 1,000 miles away, probably 20,000 miles away. They can turn you off. That's what a smart meter's for. They tell you a smart meter so that you can save £3.50 a year. It is not. The smart meter's there so that they can turn you off. Being disabled is bad. They were putting DNR notices on people who were young but disabled. All that was wrong. The only thing they'd done wrong was that they happened, unfortunately, to be disabled, so they had automatic DNR notices. That's in this country.
Unbelievable.
In the National Health Service.
And I remember covering the election of Alexis Tsipras in Greece, when the Greek people stupidly believed that he was going to deliver them from the clutches of the European Union. Of course, I knew better. I've been reporting on the European Union my entire life. I knew that he was a Trojan horse, him and Varoufakis. What the European Union did to Greece resulted in at least 2 cases of people who couldn't go to hospital being on life support machines. You know this. No, you know this to be true. On life support machines in their own homes, but the electricity bill wasn't paid, smart meters, and they were switched off. And 2 people died in their own homes. Died because they couldn't pay the electricity bill. And I was laughed at when I talked about that, and I said, that'll come here eventually. And people said, go way out of it, you silly Irish bastard. That's never going to come to the UK. I said, just wait for it. Just wait for it.
And what happened in the last year, about 10 months ago, they said, don't treat the elderly.
Yeah.
And look at how all the people in care homes were killed. And look at the Liverpool Care Pathway. I think it was 360 people, old people in Britain, died of thirst last year.
Yeah.
Of thirst. Richie, they died of thirst. 60,000 old people a year die of the cold in Britain. But these were people of, the things that they're going to do through the social credit, if we don't stop this mask nonsense, this social distancing nonsense. I remember going to East Germany in the 70s, and I saw they had a big board up, a huge, what are those poster boards, you know, the billboards, and it was full of pictures of people who'd worked well that week and had done good things for their factory. All these smiling faces. That was in East Berlin. When I got back from East Berlin, I remember writing an article about it, and they invited me to go back again. I didn't think I'd get out, so I didn't.
You weren't born stupid. No, thanks. I'll take a pass on that. We've got about 5 minutes left on tonight's show. And can I just say before you get the last word, and you always do, everything you said there, I was that radio presenter and producer in the mainstream that was incredibly dismissive and very discourteous to people over the years. Many of them, like yourself, with the medical background and the brains. I was discourteous at times and I just ignored. Nobody coerced me. I went looking. Everything you've discussed here tonight is a genuine agenda. It's a real problem. It's happening now. It cannot be ignored. And I say that to anybody who's listening to this for the first time. Everything from the child stealing state to the chemtrail program to the depopulation of rural areas to smart cities to human settlement zones. It's all true, people. It's in their own documentation. I know it sounds crazy, and I know you don't want to face it, but it's absolutely true. It's happening right now in front of your eyes. Vernon, final few minutes to you. I don't know where you want to go in the last few minutes. Do you want to talk about what people can do about it? There is some good news coming out of Italy. Restaurateurs there in their thousands are telling the government, excuse my language, fuck you, we're going to open. And if that is true, thank God for that.
I saw some video of the army, and I've forgotten where it was. I think it was in some South American country. The army fighting the police who were trying to...
Ecuador it was. Well done.
It was glorious. And they were coming off better, of course, because the police were running away and their motorbikes were falling over. It was brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. The fact is that they are ruthless, psychopathic people. The people who are involved in all of this, the people who are doing this to us, the people... There are still people around who think it's all an accident and they're making mistakes and they're cocking it all up. They aren't. They know exactly what they're doing. They know that COVID-19 is no worse than the flu because they were told that back in March by the government's own committee. The virus was downgraded back to flu. It took them 2 days to put it on their website, and as far as I immediately slammed it on mine, I thought, well, that's it. I don't need to have to do any more about the coronavirus because that's finished. Not one paper that I saw actually even mentioned it, and yet it was the most important thing that had happened. And if you don't believe it, go to my website, have a look, because there's a link there. They have left it on the government site, but it'll take you 3 days to find it because it's hidden away. The fact is we're fighting a war. That's the fact. We're fighting a war. And people, we have to all be together. The people, there's an awful lot of of incestuous stuff. People send each other tweets, and people snipe at somebody who hasn't said the right thing. Like, I said that the whole of this started in the early part of the 20th century, and there will be people who will be doing tweets saying, "Oh no, well I can trace it back to 1843."
It doesn't matter.
Who gives us
exactly?
Stuff? We're fighting a bloody war here. You can't go insy-pincy faffing around looking for little facts and sniping at each other. We have to fight together. If we don't fight together, then we're sunk. And they'll have us all forced into prison and vaccinated or shot or whatever. I am not exaggerating. This is real. This is actually the most terrifying situation in human history. This is worse than World War II, World War I, with apologies to those people, because they don't just want to kill us, they want our humanity. They want our souls. I'd rather be dead than have this vaccine that they want to give people, not because of all the horrible things that I've said that I know it can do. And I've done videos about the terrible side effects, not because of that, but because I don't know what else it's going to do.
Yeah.
I am not going to have somebody tell me that I must be vaccinated with some experimental stuff when neither they nor I know what it's going to do to me, how it's going to harm me psychologically, physically, spiritually, any other way. Nobody knows that. Nobody's going to tell me
haven't a
I
clue.
have a vaccine for a disease which has a 99% plus recovery rate and which is nowhere near as bad in terms of deaths per year as pneumonia. When's the last time they had national lockdowns for pneumonia?
For pneumonia,
When's the last time?
Or for chest infections. We've got 30 seconds. We've got 30 seconds and 30 seconds only. I hate to go out on a bit of bad news, but it's to your credit, you predicted this. Morrison's supermarket has come out and said they'll be banning customers who refuse to wear a face mask. I think Morrison's is the first one to break cover and say we're banning people for not wearing face masks.
I think they will have to let people who have exemption go into the shop. They cannot stop people yet. They cannot yet stop people going and buying bread to survive. And I shall be going into the supermarket without a mask, and we'll see what happens.
See what
if I get
happens
arrested.
then.
We'll go to court and say, why can't I eat?
You won't be with us next Monday. I'm hoping that the following Monday, that'll be up to you. We'll see how the land is lying. I know you've got other things going on as well. You're away next week. Just that we're rushing up on time now. Because I'm not on YouTube, I've got to get this repeating every 2 hours on the clock. So we'll leave it there for today. Just want to thank you for doing that. You've put that as succinctly as anybody I've ever heard do it in 25 minutes, what this agenda is. And people should take that audio on its own at 25 minutes and play it to as many people as you possibly can. VernonColeman.com. Go to health. Click enter the website. Go to health on the left-hand side and you'll find links to the books and to leaflet text that you can use. Get involved because there's no time for sitting around now waiting for somebody else to do it. 15 seconds are yours. Go ahead, Vernon, and thanks again.
Everybody has to do something. Stop sniping. Stop worrying about silly comments on each other's tweets. Get out. Find other people. Spread the word. Get people to watch videos, listen to websites, look at websites, listen to this program or Richie's program all the time. Do stuff because we're in a war.
Thanks again, Vernon. Speak to you next time. Thanks for that.
Thanks.
The great Dr. Vernon Coleman live on the radio this Monday, January 11th, 2021. He won't be with us next week. Hopefully, please God, the week after that. That's it for the programme.